everybody. It is Romania Black, and we only have 3 episodes left of DanDaDan. We only have 3 episodes left of season 2. That's wild to me. And it's not like season 1 where it was like, oh, well, you just season 2's right around the corner. Who knows when season 3 will be. I don't think they've had any confirmations of season 3 yet. I'm sure they'll make a season 3. You know they will. I think the manga is further enough along that they can do that. So I do want to talk real quick before we get started. A couple comments from episode 8 and episode 9 from Alexandra Q and Christopher Peterson, who are patrons over on Patreon. Also to give a shout out to Geen and Truck, as always, for moderating, helping me stay spoiler free and all that fun stuff. So we're going to dive into episode 10. I'm super excited because we had a new character reveal. Someone had pointed out, and this is not Alexander Q or Christopher Peterson's comment, someone had pointed out over on Patreon that it's interesting because we got Gigi introduced around episode 11 of DanDaDan season 1, and now at episode 10 of season 2, we have another character introduced. And so I was like, okay, I'm very open to that. I don't know if this is going to be like a Bleach scenario where you have, in Bleach, you had your 4 main characters that had abilities, and then you had a plethora of side characters, some of which were more spiritually aware than others and that got more involved than others, but it was mainly the main 4 and then like some side characters around. And I see some influence of Bleach in DanDaDan, so I'm like, okay, maybe this new character that's being introduced is going to be kind of like Momo's friends and just be a side character, but not like one of the main 4 that have abilities. We'll see. We'll see where that goes. We'll see how that ends up. But I think that that's an interesting... I'm curious to know about this main character. He seems like he's going to interact with Okarun, so find out. But Alexander Q said for episode 8, Okarun's thinking of rock music to find his own rhythm, and thus battling classical music with rock was a very clever way to introduce that trope. I know, I loved episode 8 so much for that battle with Okarun and the musicality. I never thought that DanDaDan would be like edging into the music anime genre, but it does. It has. So I think that's really cool. So I love that. That's really awesome. And then Alexander Q for episode 9 says, I think no one noticing Gigi's transformation into Evil Eye is because they don't have a lot or any spiritual energy, so they can't sense it. I agree with that. If I remember correctly, Ira could see Acrobatic Silky once she came into possession of Okarun's golden ball, but none of her friends could because their spirit energies hadn't been boosted or granted or opened, whichever term best applies to the situation. I think that's a really good point, and I think that I wanted to mention it here because I think that's going to tie into the last part of this season because we've gotten mention of that other golden ball again. It's haunting a residence, and I'm like, I don't know if this guy that we're just being introduced to is going to maybe come in contact with the golden ball and maybe get some powers of his own. I don't know, but the fact the golden ball is present enough that social media is noticing it means there could be a lot more spiritually aware people that pop up than there were prior, which leads to a lot of chaos that could ensue. And DanDaDan loves chaos, so we'll have to see what happens. But thank you, Alexander Q, for that comment. Christopher Peterson for episodes 8 and 9. They noted first, Gigi's mom might be crazy, but we haven't seen anything hinting on the same thing for his dad, unless you count him choosing this particular pairing. At the very least, it seems that Gigi takes more after his mom. And I wanted to say with that I feel like maybe DanDaDan's creator draws a little inspiration from Horikoshi, who creates My Hero Academia, because there's a main pair of men in My Hero Academia. One is a lot like Okarun as the main character, and the other one, personality-wise, is as far removed and polar opposite as Gigi as you possibly could get. However, their parents are like literally the same dynamic. Gigi's parents and one of the main characters in My Academia, I'm not going to spoil, but if you've watched that series, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Their parents are exactly the same dynamic. Same dynamic. And so where the mom takes after the son and kind of fosters that, and you're like, oh, that's where you get it from. Same dynamic. So I feel as if the creator of DanDaDan has drawn from Horikoshi and references them a little bit in terms of that. Because it's like on the nose identical. And until Christopher Peterson said that, I was like, oh, So, Christopher Peterson's other part of their comic has a little bit to do with Evil Eye. So, if you are easily triggered about Evil Eye criticism, you might want to skip this part and just go straight to the reaction starting. Because I'm just going to touch base on it really quick because I thought Christopher Peterson made some points that are worth iterating, saying maybe DanDaDan isn't that interested in grappling with the potential downside of a more idealistic approach to Evil Eye. But that's okay. I've had to drop my want for following up on the consequences before in DanDaDan, like what happened to all the people that got possessed in the town, and the buildings that were destroyed when Turbo Granny and her crab spirit attacked in season 1. Should we be worried about the spirits that Evil Eye has trapped, etc.? I like it when red shirts and background characters get their due, but if they just want Evil Eye to be goofy and funny now, then fine, I'll take it. I feel a bit bad for Gigi, but at this point, his predicament is fully self-chosen and not like he doesn't know that Evil Eye is what he is and what he's about now. And sure, Gigi is a good being and doesn't want a conscious, intelligent being to die on his account, but there were other options. And that's all I'll say on that. Oh, that's all I'll say on that. But yeah, I have thoughts. I have many thoughts. I have thoughts that I've expressed for the last 3 episodes about Evil Eye, but no one wants to hear those. So if anything else with Evil Eye comes up, I will mention it just so y'all are aware. But opinions are opinions, and we can like characters and dislike characters, but whatever. I'm hoping that I like this new character that's come on the scene, and I think I might. We'll see what he's like. We'll see what he's like. But in any case, we are going to start DanDaDan, episode 22, season 2, episode 10. Thank you all so much for your comments, for your kind words, and for support. And we're going to get this started here in 3, 2, 1. Well. I get now why we had to kind of, this episode was so funny and so good. A little bit tailored. Like, I feel like if you've watched enough anime, when you watch an episode and you feel like there's a recap-ish element to it, which I hate recaps. I hate recaps. I'm like, if I need to be reminded about something, I'll go back and watch it. But I'm not a fan of recaps at all. And so there was a recap element to this episode that annoyed me. And I was just like, I know why they're doing it. They're doing it because they're going to end on a cliffhanger at a very specific tailored moment. And it's a giant kaiju. Although, what I did love about this episode is I did not see that coming at all. The fact that the golden ball was inside a kaiju and inside this spirit that's a kaiju, I'm like, okay. So then the question is our friend here, who is very socially awkward and does not know the ways of the feminine wiles, which we'll talk about, is he going to end up with kaiju powers? Because, I mean, by and large, if we're going by but I don't know. If we were going by the formula of really cool monster thing shows up and, yokai gains, I think it feels more like a yokai than an alien, but at this point, they're kind of merged at this point. It's kind of, I think that begs a very important question, which the series is going to give us an answer to, I'm sure, at one point, which is going to be, are the aliens that are in this series even aliens? Or what do we define that as? Like the banana folk that were in episode 1, and then obviously Peeny Weenie and Chiquita, they are aliens because we've literally seen them approach Earth from a UFO. But the Kento family, which seemingly look like aliens but have been embedded in the earth for hundreds of years, where does that line get blurred? Or have they immigrated to the earth and then now they're part of the earth? How does that work? Is that a social commentary thing? I feel like we're going to get into that discussion as we go through the series, but it's like, is the kaiju an alien? Is it a yokai? They kind of all look the same anymore. So it's one of those, how do we factor that in? Because the earthworm, you could say, looks like an alien, but it was part of the earth. So it's like, the Mongolian death worm. So I don't know. So that begs the question of, is the kaiju going to be an opponent that we face and defeat? Kind of like the Nessie monster. Is it going to be like one of those, like from season 1? Or is it going to potentially be a spirit that is able to imbue powers upon other characters, like our bespectacled would-be Casanova in this episode. I don't know. I think that it sets up what I really like about this episode. I know I complained about the recap elements because I just hate recaps, and my disdain for them overfloweth whenever I have it. But one thing I really like about this episode is it does leave us with a really good framework for the penultimate episode and the season finale. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited because you have a giant kaiju the size of Godzilla. How are we going to fight that? So, because our heroes, even though Momo is able to project her psychic powers to be giant fists, and Silky and Okarun are good at like close combat, and so is Evil Eye, none of them really... Evil Eye is probably the most well-equipped to fight the kaiju at this point because he has the spirit ball that he can kick around like a soccer ball and thus could harm the kaiju. So Evil Eye essentially is probably the best equipped to handle the kaiju more. But I say that, then Silky was able to fight the Titans in the musical episode back in episode 8. So let me rephrase it this way. Okarun is the least equipped to fight the kaiju because he's like a close range combat fighter. Silky, a little bit more so with Ira. And then I think Evil Eye has the best chance against the kaiju with the spirit soccer ball, whose origins we're not going to worry about right now. So then the question becomes, how do we convince Evil Eye to fight on their side and fight the kaiju? Because unlike the Mongolian death worm, which Evil Eye had reason to fight alongside fighting the Kinto family, Evil Eye has no incentive to fight the kaiju. By all accounts, the kaiju is essentially maybe going to do what Evil Eye wants to do, and that's destroy humanity. So it's going to be interesting in the next episode or two to see, like, how do we get Gigi involved? How do we get Evil Eye convinced that he needs to fight this thing and help them? More so, how do we convince him to help them is the big part of it. So I like the setup, and that's going to be interesting to see that go down, right? Mm-hmm. And there's the added part of it that it's the golden ball that Okarun needs, right? Which I thought that golden ball wasn't going to show up till like way down the line. So we'll just see where that goes. But let's talk about our bespectacled friend here, shall we? This episode is really all about him. And there are some parts of this episode that are so freaking hilarious that they made my week. I loved them so much. I like the Earth like alarm clock. I feel like there's maybe something more to that, but we'll see. I mean, if he's just a human that's just, socially awkward, that's fine. But he gets up at 5 o'clock every morning, which kudos to you, cannot do. 6 a.m. is like my standard wake up time. But I like the brushes his teeth, washes his hands, eats breakfast, and then brushes his teeth again. Just that little bit of like anal retention there. Also, I'm sorry, the glasses on the little keychain stand that are the exact same glasses, they're clearly not all prescription. They're all fake glasses because you wouldn't have the money to buy $400 prescription glasses unless Japan just has an amazing eye insurance that we are not privy to. But I feel like the glasses are just him trying to be like Okarun and imitate him, right? Now the combs, the multi-combs, God, I love it. It gives me, I think what I like about his character in terms of like just when he's like singing on his way to school and doing the hair and everything, what I like about his character is it gives me kind of a Kuwabara vibe from Yu Yu Hakusho. I grew up loving Yu Yu Hakusho, especially when I was in high school. I watched it on Toonami like all the time. I love Yu Yu Hakusho. And Kuwabara, like kind of like pseudo delinquent, but he's actually got like a good heart, but then he's kind of like a little bit awkward around the ladies. And I love Kuwabara so much. And there are shades of him in this character. He's just not fully realized his Kuwabara-ness yet, which we're going to talk about. He's not fully realized it yet. But I also like, he walks to school and like has like the little rap and kind of gives me the vibes. It gives me also like a little bit of a Todo vibe from Jujutsu Kaisen, which I love Todo. The problem is he's not fully self-realized. He doesn't have the confidence. He's got the riz. He's got the moves. But once he turns that corner, combs his hair, and then gets around people, he just becomes quiet. and like lowers his voice. And I'm like, dude, no, you need to embrace the charisma, embrace it. But he has a similar confidence issue that Okarun does back from season 1. And then when he sees Okarun getting chummy with Momo, he's like, but wait, Okarun and I are both kind of awkward guys. How does he get the girl and I don't? Which I think there's a very important commentary here that I like the mangaka is doing. The mangaka is making a very important commentary because, again, this is a shonen. The primary target audience are young men. Obviously, not all of the target audience is young men because I'm watching this show and, as you can see, not a young man. Or hopefully you don't assume that. But I feel like it's for its primary target audience, which are teenage young men, 2 young men, it's making a very good commentary and bringing up a good point because I feel like we have a lot of men, especially in the social media area, that have made themselves known through social media. And so that it's very apparent that they're like, why can't I get the girl? And I'm like, well, first of all, you got to be yourself and you have to be, you can't try to imitate being someone else. And that's kind of this guy's thing is his shtick is trying to imitate Okarun to compete with him. You can't do that. But also there's a layer of confidence. You have to be confident in yourself. And the other thing is you have to be nice. And you have to be nice and open-minded and a kind person that is also like respectful of the woman that you are trying to talk to. Okarun, the secret of why Ira and Momo love Okarun is he's a nice person who is genuinely respectful and kind. And, Momo, her boyfriend that she had before Okarun, was none of those things, and she hated it. Ira respects that so much and is attracted to that. Women are attracted to, it's like anything. You're attracted to different things. There are women that like bad boys, understandably. There are women that have different preferences. But in general, if you are respectful and kind-hearted, that's going to get you a lot of places. Just saying. And you've got to be genuine. And you also can't be weird. That's another thing. You can't be weird. Sorry, you can't. Maybe there are some girls out there that like that, but a lot of them don't. So anyway, he sees Okarun get the girl, and then we come in there, and what I love about this is that when we cut to him, we have Okarun with his magazines, we cut back to the one guy, he's sitting, and people noted this in the beginning of last season, that Momo sometimes sits in her classroom in the main character seat, which there is an organization of a anime classroom, and typically the anime protagonist will sit in like the back left corner of the classroom. Left if you're facing the back of the room, right if you're facing the front. But they'll sit in that back corner, and that's like the protagonist seat. So we noted this in season 1 that Okarun never sits in the protagonist seat. That's kind of what makes him kind of a unique main character. He doesn't have main character syndrome, but Momo does in her classroom. And this guy sits in the main character seat, which is just hilarious. Also, the glasses on the back of the magazine he's looking at reminded me of like the Squirtle Squad glasses, which are funny. But he is reading the same magazine, or the same type of magazine that Okarun is, trying to figure out how he's able to get the girl. And I thought that what was really cool about this episode was the recap part is what it is. I love when they show us that he's been following the group as well. And now you kind of want to go back to the very beginning and see if he's been there all along and we just didn't notice it. That would have been really funny if that was the case. Or if it's just done for humor to insert him to say, oh no, he was there all along. You just didn't notice. When if you went back and looked at those episodes or that part of the manga, you wouldn't have known anyway. But what I love is that he follows them around to try to gauge everything. That part was really funny. And then to go back, this whole episode, though, this part of the episode that they did a recap of, I think I was mainly so annoyed with it because that episode annoyed me in general, just the miscommunication. But then, of course, he sees them have the kiss. And that impacts him like, how'd you get this girl? How'd you manage to do it? Right? And then we get the OP. So one thing this episode does really well that I like is the transition of the flashback back to the present. Like once the OP is over, we cut back and we're in the present. And that was all the backstory we needed to know why this guy is now trying to confront Okarun to ask him, like, what's your deal? And at first he tries to, like, show him the same magazine, and Okarun just doesn't notice. And he tries to stand right in front of him like he wouldn't notice either, which is amazing. But then the Gundam, the freaking Gundam. God, I love it. And he had the paintbrushes already ready to go. That scene of him, like, walking around the Gundam holding it like this is the funniest thing I've seen all week. It is the funniest thing I've seen all week. It was so funny. That's my type of humor. My type of humor is just this really off the wall, kind of clever, like little, that's my style of humor. Like, not the goofy goober gags, but just this really weird shit. Like, that's just, I find that hilarious. And then he just finally is like, I'm just going to confront him. This way I will win. And I like that Okarun's like, what, you're talking to me? And he calls him his enemy, which he's like, why am I your enemy? Like, what, are you interested in Momo? Which he's not. He just wants to be able to talk to girls that he believes are cute and pretty, like Momo and Ira. Right? And he's like, it's strange. And then he just, like, insults Okarun to his face, saying, you're not particularly handsome. You're short and quite dull. And Okarun's like, you don't even know me, dude. F my drag, right? And here's the thing. Women, oftentimes, I feel like women are not necessarily, I mean, there is a physical attraction, right? You've got to be physically attracted to someone unless, you know, you're not, unless you're ace or on the ace spectrum, which is high, which I will admit, I am on the ace spectrum, so I'm not sexually attracted to people really, but I understand the physical attraction of it, like, you know, the aesthetic. And there are certain aspects of a male face or features that I find, like, physically appealing, like blonde hair, blue eyes, super tall. Love that. But I will admit that I've seen guys that have brown hair and brown eyes. And I was like, oh, they're handsome too. Like, so it's just like, you know, there are attractive features that men can have, but it's not really that. For me, it's more personality. And it's your personality, it's your humor, it's your intelligence, it's your open-mindedness. That, to me, will speak louder than however you look, right? And I think for a lot of women, yes, there has to be a physical attraction or a sexual attraction, if that's your thing. But also, you have to get along with them. Or it's not going to last. There's no longevity to it. And Momo, it's Okarun's personality that makes him attractive to Ira and Momo. How are you popular with the beautiful girls? He's like, I'm not popular at all. So then Momo comes in and she's like, look, I found your other missing family jewel. We need to go check it out. And Okarun's like, let's not talk about my balls here in front of everybody. This entire scene was just like a tour de force of miscommunication and just chaos. And I was like, oh my God. But if you break it down, it all makes sense. Like, Momo comes in, once says, hey, found your missing testicle. We need to go get it. Okarun's like, hey, let's not talk about this. The guy freaks out like, oh my God, she's talking about family jewels and this is totally okay. He's like, we weren't talking about that much, so it's not a nuisance at all. And she's like, oh, is this your friend Okarun? And he speaks for Okarun, saying each person has a different definition of friendship. He's like, I suppose we're friends. And she's like, oh, cool. She's like, well, be good to Okarun. It's nice that he has a friend. And they're both like, yeah. And he's like, anyway, there was a golden ball. And then I love, he's like, an adventure. And he's like, well, let's talk about that outside. Which clearly Okarun is like uncomfortable because he's like, I don't want to talk about my testicle or about this spiritual business in front of my classmates. Let's go outside. She was so excited that she didn't think about that. And she's like, oh, you're right. Cool. Meanwhile, this guy is thinking, oh my God, they're doing spicy talk, which is not the context at all. He's just misunderstanding. And then we have this girl who's the class president. This girl with the pigtails and the green bow that stands out from her other two. I like she's like the opposite of Momo, and she has two best friends who have the pigtails and hair design of Momo's best friends, but they're like the polar opposite as well. And she's like, oh, you're in class B, right? She's like, can you please stop visiting other classes so often? Which, here's the thing. This girl, the way that she handles it, comes across as a little bit rude. But I respect this girl because what she's doing is she's the class president. She kind of looks like a female Okarun in a way. She has like the brown eyes and dark hair, kind of looks a little bit like Okarun. She is trying to defend her classmates. Momo has a reputation, as we've talked about in season 1. It's easy for us to forget about her reputation because we've seen her in season 2 be total opposite that reputation. But Momo has a reputation of being forward with men. That's not the case at all, but it's still a gossipy reputation and rumor that she has in the school. And some people still maintain that. The class president is just making sure that Okarun is not uncomfortable around Momo, because from the outset of it, if you didn't know Momo and you didn't know their relationship like we, the audience, know it, it would seem like she's kind of being a little forceful with Okarun. And so I appreciate the class president kind of saying like, hey, let's treat everybody nice. And, maybe don't come in here and harass Okarun a little bit. Like, I appreciate that. I think that's awesome. It's just so frustrating in the moment because the class president does not know what we, the audience, knows. And she's misunderstanding the situation. And it is a ball of chaotic misunderstanding, right? And because she's trying to be like, and she's not. And then what makes it even more chaotic is that the girl is trying to defend Okarun and saying like, hey, don't just get up in his face. He doesn't need to be harassed by you. Momo's like, I'm not harassing him. And Momo comes across as like a little delinquent and crass when that's not the case. And then you have this guy who is misunderstanding the class president just being nice and supportive of Okarun as her being attractive to him. And it just creates even more chaos. He's like, see, Okarun, all these girls are attracted to you. When really, this girl with the green bow may not be attracted to Okarun at all. She's just trying to be a nice person and defend her fellow classmate because she's a class president and that's her duty. And it's just, it's chaos. It's just chaos. Right? And she's like, don't intimidate him. And meanwhile, Okarun, there's a part of you and a part of myself as the viewer that wants Okarun to stand up for himself in this moment because he's come so far. But at the end of the day, this still has all happened in this series in a very short amount of time. And Okarun has not had a chance. Okarun's just now getting used to his classmates talking to him. So as he explains to Momo later, he's like, I was so overstimulated in the moment. I didn't know what to do and I didn't want to be mean. And so I just kind of was like, Meanwhile, this guy is just like, he's so popular. What do I need to do? Do I need to cut in to be popular? And it's like, no. And he's like, now she's cute. And he's like, now I'll cut in. But the only thing is that I like this new character, but the 10-gallon weenie joke was like levels of secondhand embarrassment that I was like, oh God, no. Oh no. I think that this series, my only thing with DanDaDan, we've talked about it skirting the line and it like nearly getting to the wrist slapping moment. The only thing is that what could elevate this series to being like so good is if it didn't rely upon dick jokes so much. And I'm saying this as I know that this is a series meant for teenage boys who think that dick jokes are hilarious. And I grew up with all of it. I grew up with boys drawing penises on everything. My dad, who was a custodian at the time, had to go get a dry erase board and put in our school bathroom and tell the boys at my school, hey, you need to quit drawing dicks on things. So I'm going to put up this dry erase board. Go draw dicks on that. You can write whatever. My dad had a thing. It literally saved our high school because the graffiti of penises got so bad at my high school that you could identify which boy drew what penis by his artistic style. It was that bad, y'all. And so my dad went and found a dry erase board, hung it up in the boys' bathroom, and sat all the high school boys down one day and said, look, this needs to stop. I put this dry erase board in the boys' bathroom. You can write and draw whatever you want on it every day. I don't care what you do on that dry erase board. And every day I will erase it and you can start again the next day. It literally was a godsend. It cured everything in our school. Now, I would always ask my dad because I was like, what did they draw on the board? And you know what? He would be like, I can't tell you. He's like, that's a pact between me and the high school boys. It will never be repeated. what happens in the boys' bathroom stayed in the boys' bathroom. And it did. And to this day, my dad's like, I can't tell you. And I'm like, So I'm sure if I asked him now, years later, he would say stuff, but he was just like, you don't even want to know. And I was like, okay. But anyway, so I understand, this is all to say that I understand that this mangaka is appealing to a target demographic that will find peeny weeny and weenie jokes to be fine, har har. It just, this one scene here where they're just like staring at him, oof, the cringe, the secondhand embarrassment. And I'm not one to like cringe shame. It was just like, yikes. And the girl are like, it just like instantly broke up the conversation, which maybe that's what needed to happen. Maybe that's what needed to happen, you know? So then we get Momo and Okarun talking afterwards. And I like they clear things up. One thing DanDaDan does really well is that they have this moment where they kind of, there's this misunderstanding and then it immediately follows through and cleans it up. So Okarun's like, look, everybody was coming at me at once. I didn't know how to react, but I was just glad people were talking in my class. And Momo says maybe it's because you're pretty cool lately. Again, there is still a little bit of awkwardness between them. After it all, Momo is a little bit tsundere, and she doesn't want to admit that she likes Okarun. You know, after all this time, Momo's still a little hot and cold. Sometimes I'm like, girl, you're very forward with him, and then you decide to not be forward with him. Like, just come and say you like him. But this is a shonen. We wouldn't have a series nearly as long as it would be if we just came out and said our feelings. So it is what it is. But they decide to go after the complex with the golden ball. I do like that she does break the tension by saying that Okarun's little hooray was super cute. And I like that she tells him that. It's like, yeah, it's like you. It's super cute. And then this guy shows up to like eavesdrop on them. He's like, he says, why is Takakura's spicy talk okay, but mine is worthy of death? It's like, well, because you don't know the context, sir. There is no technique. You're just not in on the inside joke. I want to be lovey-dovey with beautiful girls like Miss Momo Ayase. And it's like, well, you can be if you're not weird and you're just yourself. That's the thing. That's the thing. But he just doesn't understand it. So then we get the whole thing with the kaiju. Everything about this fight with the kaiju, I loved. I loved everything about this fight. The visuals. Now, again, one thing that I do love is we had a little bit of a this was a big parallel. The parallel from the last episode, from episode 11 in season 1, where Taro and Gigi were like gonna have moments with Momo that was non-consensual, and then Okarun like saved her. That exact same thing happened in this episode here. It was very much like a parallel repeat where, again, big no, sir. You don't just say, oh, at this rate, Miss Ayase's lips and mine will touch. If it's not consensual, that's a big no. That will not get you a girl at all. 100%. No. So yeah, There's a difference between Momo and Okarun accidentally bumping and like brushing lips and you thinking it's going to happen. Huge difference. So I'm glad Okarun stepped in and kept Mr. Pervert from doing something that Momo would not have been cool with. So yeah, and then the animation, there were so many screenshots that I wanted to take from this fight against the invisible kaiju to be the thumbnail for this week because it's just so good. Like, I love the shot of Okarun reaching for like the family jewel and the kaiju being there. That part was so good. There was a lot of shots. And then the shot of Momo and him standing in front of it, that part was really good too. I loved that as well. I loved the greens and reds and golden colors, which makes sense for the kaiju. Love it. She's like, watch our backpack, perv, or I'll butcher you. I love it. So yeah, they basically tried to keep him out of the way so that he wouldn't get in the way and be possibly hurt. So many good shots. When DanDaDan animates fight scenes, they do a really good job of like perspective, of symbolism, of color. Like you see them doing the piggyback ride. Also, I love the teamwork that they do where you have Momo on Okarun as the piggyback. And then when Okarun grabs a hold of Momo like a little koala, adorable. So cute. Loved that. Like, that was great. Like, I thought their fight with the kaiju was really, really well done. I liked it a lot. Now, my one thing about this, and again, Christopher Peterson kind of talked about it at the beginning of this episode, the collateral damage of this series, like, they basically just destroyed like an entire complex. So the question is, how are they going to explain it? What's going to happen? But you know what? It's fine. It's fine. I do love the interaction that they have with, what is his name in this episode? He had like a special attack that he said. I think that gave off his name. I want to try to find it. He's like, I'll have you tell me later who you guys both are. But what did he say? Yeah, he said jet stream attack. I am so curious. I thought at one point he said his name, but I can't quite remember it. Was it Kenta? Maybe? I want to say he said something along that line in this, but I can't fully remember. Maybe. Anyway, I do love the idea that because he's been trying to imitate Okarun, that the one guy has been reading the same magazines, and then he learned how to detect the optical camouflage and the invisibility. I thought that was really well done. I think that, again, I like how a gimmick of him imitating Okarun allowed him to help out in the situation. Like, that's clever writing. I like that a lot. I like this guy. So yeah, it's not a ghost, it's a kaiju, which also, oh my god, I love the idea of Okarun when his eyes get all like the little shiny sparkles in it. So funny. I love it. And then he's like, oh, is this the golden ball? She's like, quit talking about the gross conversation. And him saying he welcomes this physical contact. I'm like, is this man kinky for some family contact? Who knows? Yep. So the kaiju has eaten the golden ball, which is a problem. We talked in season 1 about the golden ball attracting spirits, which is literally what happened in season 1. So we're getting this all over again. Fun times. But yeah, like Momo just kicking him. And then the eyeball with the kaiju, so good. Now, this thing has gotten huge and is problematic. So what are we going to do about this? Tis the question, right? Tis the question. I love all the green tones. It's a fun time. Love all that. I loved Momo and Okarun working together. I love it. I liked Okarun and Silky working together back in episode 8. But this is just a lot of fun. I love this. So yeah. I don't mind this new guy. I think he has a lot of potential, and I'm really excited to see like where his character goes and what we get with him. I'm really excited for that. So I think he has a lot of potential. It's going to be fun to see like what we get in the next episode. Whether or not he gains superpowers from this kaiju is what we have to figure out. But for all intents and purposes, this was a great place to end the episode and set up the next 2 and the last 2 of the season. So it's leaving us with lots of questions for next week of how do we fight a giant kaiju when we are small? So I'm curious to know your thoughts down below about our new character and him imitating Okarun. And by the time I see your comments for this episode, I will have watched the next episode. So that's good to know. But in any case, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more of DanDaDan season 2.